What do flickering cubes, soldiers falling out of the sky, and houses that you can't even see have in common? You're never supposed to see them. Well, not any longer, because today I will show you all of this and much more. How do waterfalls work, what happens to mission areas that are not in use, and what lurks under the map of Just Cause 4. Stay tuned to find out. So let's just start with this big box on the right, which houses the Moon Room Easter egg. Once we get closer, stuff actually loads in. I'm not gonna spoil the Easter egg here, but you should definitely check it out yourself. The box containing the area is incredibly huge. The Easter egg itself is already huge, but seeing it from under the map is a whole different story. If we move over here, we can actually see the small entrance from under the map. Once we bring Rico inside, he can actually move around in the area surrounding the Easter egg. The big sphere can actually be grappled on from the outside as well. Once we move down here, we can again see just how big the surrounding area is. We can also move down to the smaller, lower area, but there's nothing much exciting here, so let's move on. Next up is the second, smaller area that you could see in the intro right next to this one. This is actually one of the mission areas of Just Cause 4, which is also why nothing here is loaded in. The mission is not active, and you would never get to see the area while not playing the mission. Once we move Rico inside, we can actually see this area to the right, which is never seen in the mission, because in the mission there's just a straight hallway leading to the area on the left. While we explore the area in the background, let's actually give you a little bit of background info. Some of you may have seen my Just Cause 3 video exploring some mission areas, where I was actually able to load them in. However, I could not do this for Just Cause 4, since the game is generally a pain to mod. So big of a pain to mod actually that I made an entire video about it, if you want to watch that. So now that we've made it down here where the IAPA core would be, let's make our way up and see where this actually goes to. And as you can see here, this actually leads to the back of the base, which is where the first mission takes place. But we're still not done with the IAPA just yet. Before we leave, let's check out Espinosa's office at the top of the tower. In the regular game, you only get to see this area in a cutscene. Despite that, Rico can move around in it just fine. At least for the most part. Here we can see the Umas, one of which Rico later yeets out of the window. On the table we can also see a bunch of pictures, most of which are just recycled from Just Cause 3. Now that we're done with the IAPA finally, let's move over to the Thunderstorm base. Here we actually have another fully walkable area that is normally also only seen in a cutscene. I am talking about the small basement where Rico learns about the backstory of his father. In the cutscene we take this small elevator we can see up here. And once again, if we take the camera down here, everything is fully modeled. And behind the big door we can once again see, despite this area only being used in a cutscene, this is for some reason loaded in at all times, and Rico can move around in it just fine. Another really strange thing you can find at this base is located right here, at the top left of the area. In this very specific spot, for some reason, the game acts as if you were under the map and randomly unloads things that you can still see. It does the same thing to these soldiers over here, but as you can see I'm still able to shoot them, so they are not actually completely gone. This isn't the only area where this happens either. Another one is on this small island to the right of Solis. But for some reason, this only seems to affect the area with the Thunderstorm base, and nothing else. This unload also seems much more aggressive and can even unload parts of Rico or his weapons, or even the sounds attached to his weapons. If we look over to the other sides, we can see that nothing else is affected. Both of these areas were brought up to me by Germany in the Just Cause Discord, so thanks to him for letting me know. Here's an exclusive to this video. Go to the bottom right of the map, over here, and you're in for a surprise. For no reason whatsoever, several soldiers will appear out of thin air and just fall to their death in the ocean. You're also getting a helicopter, that just acts like it hasn't seen anything. Now, why are these here? There likely used to be a test area here that they could walk on, that Avalanche used to test something while the game was being made, and they simply forgot to remove the spawner for these soldiers. Now, what did they test here? I have no idea. My guess would be probably something AI related, like taking cover or reacting to Rico. Now, let's get to waterfalls. And here you can get your first look at what the waterfall looks like below the surface. The waterfall itself is just this reflective plane, shaped to look like a waterfall. If we get below it, it will act like a regular body of water. Now, this by itself wouldn't really look any good, so they added these water particle effects to really pull it together. And this together makes for a really convincing effect, all things considered. And while we're at the topic of water, let's check out regular lakes next. As you can see here, lakes are simply this thin layer that just apply a different shader when you dive in, which is the exact same way as Just Cause 3 does it as well. Normally, of course, you'd never get to see this, but seeing it from under the map, it becomes really apparent how it works. Now, you can still swim on lakes out of bounds just fine. However, where it gets funky is when you dive in from the side. It simply pushes Rico to the top of the water, instead of just letting you swim where you dove in. And after taking a look at waterfalls and lakes, let's also check out rivers. Unlike lakes, rivers aren't just made from rectangles, and are much more like roads that follow a set path. We can actually see the river network from under the map really well. At certain places under the map, like this one, a lot of stuff unloads, and we can only see the rivers, which gives us an even better look at the river network. So now, let's head to the desert area. And what's one of the most interesting areas over there? It's the prison area, of course. Now this is a mission area too, but you can actually re-enter it after playing through the mission. But that's not why it's interesting. It's interesting because of its sheer size. So because of how big the area is, the game is actually struggling to keep it all loaded in at once. And that's what you can see here in the form of these weird pop-ins. As usual, of course, the game only really loads in what you'd need to see, but normally you would be inside of these rooms, not outside. So because we're outside, the game is really struggling and doesn't really know what to load in and what to unload. What's really interesting to me though is that it even unloads terrain that is part of the box that contains this entire area, which seems to indicate that the area is really hard on the game. Another detail you may have already picked up on is these debug material looking things that are all over the base inside the walls. I honestly have no idea why this would be there, but they surely served some purpose while this area was in testing. Now, these prison cells can normally be seen while exploring the area, you can just look inside. But something that does surprise me is that Rico can actually move around in them. The entire area has proper collision, and even the props in there aren't just for show. Rico can actually interact with them. And another thing about the prisons, sometimes prisons next to these big doors here are cut in half by another structure that's behind them. This means you can't actually see the NPC that's stuck in these cells, because they're obscured behind the structure. Close by to the prison area is this area over here. We also have these chimneys and tiny buildings sticking out of the ground. However, if we take the camera below the ground, we can see that these buildings aren't tiny at all, and are full factory buildings. We can even see other structures that reach way below the map, where we would never be able to see them. I have no idea why this would be done. They could have easily just chopped off the model, and no one would have ever seen it. All I can think of that this area was probably hastily made. Now that we're already in the desert, let's talk about another exclusive to this video. You might know that there is a second moon floating above the ocean in the top left of the map, over here. This was already public knowledge though, but there's still no reason for it to be there. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. However, I now have a theory why it might be here. Because if we go to this spot marked on the map over here, this does shed light at what this area might have been. So, once we wingsuit over here, you can see some flying stuff above the ocean. And at this point, you might already guess where this is going. Yes, these are remnants of another test area. There was probably a lineup with a bunch of environment materials. So if this was the case, it might make sense for the moon to be there as well. So my guess is they simply forgot to remove the moon together with these rocks. Let's also quickly take a look at the mission only areas near the tornado base, where we disabled the wind cannons. There's nothing really special about them, so let's go over them real quick. The only really special thing about the one under the big mountain is that there's some strange invisible collision right next to the door. There's also what seems to be the frame of the vents that the wind cannons shoot through, with even the sounds and effects still playing even though the mission is not active. The rest of the base is just completely empty. The base on the other side is pretty much the same. It also has some of the vents, but that's pretty much about it. It's also bigger than the base on the other side, and has this higher up area on the right here. Heading over to the airport, in this warehouse over here we can find Cesar's residence. Similar to the basement, this also only appears in a cutscene, but it's always fully loaded and Rico can move around in it just fine as well. The big airport building has some secrets as well that it tries to hide from us. For example, if we go over here, we have this big room that looks like a waiting area at an airport. However, you cannot see it from the outside. My guess would be that they did want to make the windows somewhat see-through to make it look like the airport is more alive, with a bunch of decorations in here. It's probably a similar story with these revolving doors up here. You are probably supposed to be seeing them from the outside, with them actually spinning and NPCs going in and out to make the area look more alive. But that too was cancelled. After all these mission areas that were loaded in freeroam, you might be asking, is the one at the car factory also always loaded in? But no, for some reason this one is not. And this already brings us to the end of today's video, with, you guessed it, another mission area that's always loaded in. This time, the room from the ending of the tutorial. It does look a little bit different than the one from the tutorial, but that's probably because in that the area is very dimly lit. It could also be that this is an earlier version of the one that's used in the cutscene, but I can't say for sure. We also have the big screen over here that shows a screenshot from the intro. Well, but that's all I've got for you today. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.